Welcome to Stepdad Success, turning the tide on the way stepdads are seen and show up in the world. We're a new breed of leaders raising leaders. Blood or no blood, we raise them as our own. We're connected, loving, and committed to leading them into the future. If you asked a normal dad, he'd say we're doing the impossible. He'd say, but they're not yours. How do you do it? Yet every day, stepdads around the world are forging the way. That's what we call Stepdad Success. We're leaders raising leaders, and these are our stories.
G'day, this is James Klobassa from Stepdad Success with another interview with one of our stepdads today. And interesting one today, we've got Cullen Talley from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I hope I've got that right. What I do know about Cullen is he's got an awesome accent. Another one of our guys from the States. Great to have you on this morning, Cullen. Mate, I'll dive straight in and I'll let you give yourself a bit of a wrap here at the start. Just tell us a little bit about what you do, where you're at, and a little bit obviously about your kids and how life's going for you at the moment.
Yeah, fantastic. So as James said, Cullen Talley. I live in Baton Rouge. For those of you that aren't familiar with the geography, that's about an hour from New Orleans. Most people know where that is. So about an hour down the road from New Orleans, Louisiana. I am married to Lauren. We've been married 15 years, dated 2 years before that, and I have 3 daughters. I have daughters that are now soon to be 24, one that is 22, both who've graduated college, and then a daughter who is 13. The 2 older ones happen to be daughters that I inherited as part of the relationship with Lauren. I still refer to them as my daughters in that based on the time and relationship that we've created over the last 17 years since we met. Professionally, I build and run sales organizations and business development in early stage and medium stage businesses, usually around financial services and retail technologies that are coming to market and being able to prove whether those work. So sales and business development in my background, typically travel some for work, and work out of the house as far as office is concerned. So I round a lot for the girls and the kids. So that's a bit about me, as well as on the side do some triathlon stuff. I've knocked out a few Ironman over the years and have enjoyed that, and so have some other passions in the endurance sports area. Yeah,
I've noticed you're a big into the triathlons, and obviously that takes up a fair bit of time too. Mate, I'll dive back to actually the start, and you mentioned that you and Lauren were dating for a couple of years before you obviously got together in a serious way. Just run us a little bit around that, because I always, we have these conversations around step parenting, and it's always interesting that initial meeting with the kids and how they react. And obviously, we all meet them at different ages. I met my 2 guys when they were 18 months and 3 years old, so totally different dynamic. Yours were a little bit older.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Lauren and I met through some friends and kind of hung out as friends around each other for about a year. Part of that was just where I was in life, and part of that was, it had not been that long since she had been divorced, and I knew she had 2 young kids, which honestly at the time was not something that was not really in my protocol or plan per se. And so we continued to know each other, and then I just, decided at one point about a year after that initial meeting and seeing each other out through mutual friends and stuff like that, to ask her out. And, interesting enough, it was like the first 2 weeks she had ever had not with her girls. They were back with their dad, and she did the weekend, every other weekend thing with their dad. But this was the first kind of 2-week period. So all of a sudden we met in this very kind of period of time, and then wound up starting to date like in the midst of that, and then have been together ever since. I met the girls fairly soon, so within probably a month or 2. Interestingly enough, at the time, Sammy was 7 and Marky was 5. And we were both having to work out at the same health club workout facility. And so we just kind of did it there, like introduced. I didn't know we were dating and so forth. So just kind of introduced. At the time, I was training for some stuff and had some running shorts on. So the initial feedback from my oldest daughter, Sammy, to her mom when she met me is, why does that guy wear such short shorts? So that's kind of where we started from with Sammy. And,
got up on the wrong foot straight up.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever been so insecure around a 7-year-old kind of checking me out up and down, from head to toe, not saying anything, kind of halfway behind her mom with her eyes kind of poked out around an arm looking at me. So found out pretty quickly she wasn't into the running short. So anyway, of course she had to get used to those over the years, but that's where we started. And then Marky, who is younger, 5, she's not met a friend anywhere in the world, and just was kind of an instant connection. Just as long as I could provide something of entertainment or value, then that was good. So we started there, and it sped up fairly quickly as far as my involvement. So that's probably July. Really through the end of that fall, we continued to date. Knew we were headed on a path. It became very clear that we were going to be together. And as that happened, it became clear to me what that meant. And I grew up in a household with parents who divorced when I was 17, and I have siblings that are 9, 10, and 17 years younger than me. So I saw it from, near adult to kind of younger to baby, and kind of how that played out for them. So I had a lot of compassion for that, and just felt like that was, important for me to be very clear with the girls. We can talk more about it. We had a lot of stress with Lauren's ex, and it created a lot of issues for us to deal with that we had to navigate, both in terms of Lauren and I's relationship as well as the girls.
Sure. And apart from the shorts, how do you think they kind of responded to having someone new around? And you kind of always, from my point of view, the younger kids, they seem to be very flexible in that situation and normally don't kind of rebel. It's more as you get into the teens that they push back. Did you find any of that, or was it kind of fairly amicable straight up, or with the kids?
No, so here's what I would say is that Sammy, our oldest, really carried a lot of the stress. So Lauren and her ex's divorce was painful and difficult and fairly dramatic as it relates to, there was a long history of kind of emotional abuse and eventually some physical at the end, and just a lot of noise, and then there was a lot of anger and stuff. And so Sammy, as the oldest, really carried a lot of that tension between the two. So, literally drop-offs handled at public locations, police having to be involved to get kids when they're supposed to be dropped off at the right time, in and out of court. So just a lot of stress. And so I think for Sammy, there was just in general this challenge around, kind of loyalty. And as a 7-year-old, I mean, she loved her dad, she loved her mom, and wanted, them to be able to work and all that kind of stuff. So when I showed up, there was always this kind of reservation, and that lasted until until Lauren and I had Riley Reed, our youngest daughter. And then I think she started to see, we had spent enough time together, and I made lots and lots of investments in them at this point. But she also, I think, started to see me more as a dad versus just her mom's husband. So that was the case with Sammy. And in fact, when we brought them to dinner, when we were to tell them that I had proposed to Lauren, we were sitting in this nice restaurant. We brought them to this place, and they get to make their own pizzas in this really cool spot. We're about to tell them Sammy's about to take a bite. We tell them we're engaged. Sammy drops her pizza and runs immediately to the bathroom. So that's kind of how that was. We were dated for about 18 months, but I think for her, there was more challenge just because of the stress of that divorce, and then her trying to feel like, which team do I pick? Which was not which. There was some dynamics that kind of created that. For Marky, younger one, she's kind of always been go with the flow, easy, chill, however that needs to happen, and has been that since she was a child, and just kind of wherever she is, and she's kind of present to that. And if she's over at Dad's, she's at Dad's. If she's with Mom and Cullen, she's with Mom and Cullen, and she really didn't carry kind of the stress of that. So it was very different, even though they're only about 20 months apart.
Sure. Do the at that time you said they were spending time with their dad. Do they still do that? Is that relationship still there? And what's the dynamic now between even you guys and him? Yeah,
so great question. So, until they got out of their teens and kind of into high school, they did every other weekend with their dad. So we had them for about 10 days, and he had them for 3 or so. And there was a whole bunch of noise in court about whether that needed to change or not. And we kind of worked through that at one point and got that clarified and set in stone, because that was part of the problem and created some stress. And one of the tactics that I wound up deciding that we needed to use was anything that was left to be argued against needed to be settled once and for all, so it just eliminated the question, because there was so much angst that I needed to have that settled. And so, very specific about some tactics, not win or lose, but just settle. Let's get clear, right? So I went through a number of those things. So they remained in relationship, have a relationship with their dad to this day as young adults. Here, my assessment is, and I think they would echo this the same way, not that he'd probably want to hear that, but, they appreciate the fact that they're his dad, but when it comes down to their dad, when it comes down to, questions about life, decisions about classes when they were both in college, they both finished college now, decisions about, work, decisions about relationship, those kinds of things, this is where, my investment day after day, day after day, day after day, has become more that guiding force, and something that I'm deeply proud of and so appreciative of their desire to have my input in their lives to this day. And it's very different now as young adults, because I'm like, hey, here are my thoughts, but guess what? You get to decide. So it's a wonderful experience, but that only comes on the heels of 100,000 decisions and efforts and days and things over the last 17 years.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just in talking to you, I kind of get the feeling that you came from a fairly stable background. What was that like? I know you said that your parents divorced, but what was it like bringing, as you were raised?
So it's funny that you say that, because I've worked really hard to create stability in my life as an individual, and certainly in our family's life. I did not come from a stable environment. My parents were fairly young when they had me, not necessarily at the time, but at the time, mom was like 18 and I got married at 19. She had me, and dad was about, I guess, 24 or so. Their marriage was always challenged and problematic, and poor communication, a lot of chaos and noise physically, emotionally, that I grew up in. And then that continued, and then my brother and sister were born to my parents when I was 9, and then when I was 10. So at that point, basically, they had infants and toddlers to take care of, so I just kind of handled stuff on my own. And so, I really kind of took over my own life at about 10, 11 years old, even though I lived in a house with my parents, and, we were fine financially and all that kind of stuff. As it relates to kind of structure and those kinds of things, it was all on me. I decided what I was going to do school-wise, what I was going to do sports-wise, when I was going to go here, when I was going to go there. There were basically no real rules. I just kind of set it up. And then as a young adult, I kind of overreacted to some of that chaos and really needed a lot of structure. So I've relaxed from some of that now on an interpersonal level. But you're right. I do have a lot of structure, a lot of stability in and around me. I've built that in myself and then created that in my home. But that is actually because I grew up with none of it.
Right. I was going to say, did you have any, was there a role model there that was leading you at the start, or was it just the fact that you had to kind of thing that kind of, because you obviously got solid values and stuff, and I can, you're obviously passing those down to your kids if they're coming to you for answers and that sort of thing. Did you have that role model early on, or was that just something that was like forced, just because of the situation?
Yeah, so it's funny because there was some deep value things that did come from my parents around just connection to spirituality, and not in the sense that we did go to church and stuff like that, but it was deeper than that, right? There were some things about that. There's some things about sharing and respect that came through. So even in the midst of that chaos, there were some basic fundamentals as it relates to hard work. Even though my dad didn't work, there was still my mom kind of did, but they worked in the house. But it's interesting because my brothers and sisters, we all have kind of some of these common themes, and we all grew up in this environment that it doesn't seem like my wife always laughs because she's like, I do not understand how this came out of that. And I'm like, I know, there was a lot of noise on top, but there was a couple of key themes that did certainly come through as gifts from my parents that I appreciate from them. As far as any particular role models, no, there really wasn't for me. I mean, I was in this part of being in endurance sports for me early on, so swimming and running, there was a little bit from the coaches, but there was something about that in those sports that required so much training so often. There's a lot of repetition, and so I think that just got ingrained in who I was starting as a 9-year-old as I started swimming competitively, and so I think that just formed me in a way, and it gave me some boundaries. There was a Christian youth group I was a part of, so I wound up being associated with some groups, but role models didn't really show up for me until I was kind of 18, out of the house, in college, and I started kind of linking myself to men who I felt like were good mentors and could kind of backfill for the lack of guidance from my father.
Right. Tell me, like, your daughters are obviously a lot older now, and you said that they do come to you, for those kind of bigger questions. I actually, in the conversations that I'm having with other stepdads, I feel that it's almost a common trait or a common kind of thing that's happening across the board. Like it always seems that the kids resonate almost more so with their stepdads. Not because, I'm not saying, their original dads aren't good or whatever, like everyone comes in different situations. But what do you think you said that that's from, making lots of kind of effort and daily deposits and doing the work, just as far as communication. But, what do you see as behind that? What's right at the core of that? You talked about loyalty earlier.
Yeah. I just think that there is, for my girls, it's just when they look at the results their dad's created in his life, it's hard to go ask the questions. And it's not that he's bad or terrible. It's just been this kind of constant, in this same, financially challenged, not, really making some efforts, making some pretty strange decisions as it relates to relationships and how some of those things have gone down. And so for them, it's I think it's kind of looking at that, and then it's also just been the level of accountability that I've required and the way in which we enjoy life together, because we have a lot of fun. We do a lot of things. They see the sacrifices that I've made for them very clearly, but also hold them to a high standard. And ultimately, I think the thing for us in our home is that I think if you ask both of them, and at some point, if that makes sense, we can put them on the phone, but on another time. But I think the thing for them is once Lauren and I had Riley Reed, and now I officially have my daughter, did anything change? And it didn't. And to this day, and everything that I do, whether that's time, attention, money, whatever, they are the same to me as Riley Reed is. Now, they're different people, they're different ages. I didn't get them from the time they were a baby, so there are differences. But as it relates to my investment in them, my love for them, the way I value them, they are equal to me, to the daughter that happens to share my DNA.
Yeah, beautiful. And just talking around that whole situation there, or that whole conversation there, like the tagline of this podcast is actually leaders raising leaders, and that's kind of what I'm picking up. You're instilling those good values, and it sounds like your girls are kind of growing up, on the right side of the, or the good side of life. How are they going in life? How are they? What do you see them being, and are they kind of growing up to what you kind of expected?
Man, we are so. It's so cool now because you worry and you wonder and you worry and you wonder, and it's certainly we're certainly not in a perfect situation. But both girls have finished college now and graduated and done so with high marks, which is great. They both continue to be very engaged with the family. When I was their age, I didn't give a rat ass about hanging out with my family, even though I had younger brothers and sisters. I did, but the idea that they're looking to figure out when we're going on vacation, just us, and don't always have to have friends and stuff like that. So just a level of desire to be a part of our life is fantastic. For them in their lives, we're really going through this transitional phase, and I think it's been interesting for them because I am a strong personality. I fairly often have an opinion that I'm willing to share if people are interested in it. And there's just been this process that we've gone through where I'm like, on a lot of the questions they have, I'm like, nah, I don't have the answer. Here are my thoughts, and here's some things you could try. And ultimately, it's up to you. It's your life to decide. And so they're both working. They both have just recently. The oldest one had lived away for a while and then moved back to where we are, and has recently got another job and is following some passions. And she and I went through a process about 6 months ago that I kind of coined Design Your Life as part of a quarterly target that I set up, because she was really kind of frustrated and had a lot of anxiety about being able to do, what she wants to do. She's a competitive barrel racer, so rides horses in rodeo, for those that are familiar with it, and was trying to figure out a way to, she basically had decided, well, I can't do it anymore because I have to go to work. And I'm like, so we went through this whole process of like, what would your life look like if you could have it any way? So quit with all the limitations. And so I went through kind of 3 or 4 lunches, took some notes, fed them back to her, talked to the possibilities, the emotion, and we kind of designed it out. And so I think that really kind of opened up some things for her. And so she's really starting to create some of that before, because she still kind of operated in the past with some of the limitations of, I think, some of what she took as an earlier child. And so there's been some unwrapping of that to say, hey, this is now your life. You can create however you fit. But she needs some help kind of seeing life through that lens. So we did some work on that for sure. And, that's still in process. And then with Mark, my middle one, she just kind of really redefined herself, just took on a new role inside of an organization, has just taken off with it. And I'm a little bit like, hey, congratulations. I'll answer questions when you need to, and I'm just going to kind of get out of the way, and I'm just going to celebrate what you created for yourself.
Yeah, awesome. It's amazing watching them grow and how they change. And as I said, my boys are only 8 and 10 at the moment, but even just watching them come from 18 months and 3 years, there's so much change, and it happens so quickly, doesn't it?
Yep, it does. It does.
Tell me, like, you've obviously had some great times, and it sounds like relationships are really awesome. Everything sounds very tight in the family. What's been the toughest time?
The toughest, probably collectively with both of them, would be the early stages of our marriage, when Lauren's ex was, coming after her, me, us, and just being so full of rage and anger, and then trying not to let it out. And just there were times where, you try not to say what you don't want to say, and you say it anyway. And you're just so, just because of the way he operated and the way he treated Lauren, and I did the best I could under the circumstances, and I think that was some of the toughest times, because I knew it was hard for them, but it was so overwhelming. I just used to have these feelings, and we'd have to go to court and stuff like that, where I would just I felt like somebody had dropped like liquid mercury in the back of my skull, and it would run through my jaw and into my shoulders and down my arms, and it just was the most basic male instinct I've ever had. And so some of that was stuff that I needed to work on inside me, and some of that was earned. But I think that was some of the tougher times, kind of in general, because it put too much on them, and they didn't really respond too much. But I know that was tough. And then I think too, we had some decisions around school and extracurriculars where we were trying to navigate. So everything tough for us was when we got into these scenarios about, making choices, and then it getting wrapped around kind of this tripod. Lauren and I were very, very aligned on most things. I mean, that's one of the biggest gifts she gave me as a stepfather, for sure, compared to what I've seen other people go through, where there's kind of this distance created, or this sub-level of parenting. But, anytime we got into this kind of tripod between us and their dad, I think those are probably the themes that were probably the toughest.
Sure. It's interesting. Like, do you have any connection with him now? Or is it all kind of squared away?
So we haven't. I made some attempts early on. I wrote letters. I tried to solve it, but they just went to basically nowhere. When we, when we were even trying to buy a vehicle for the oldest one the first time, there was a bunch of noise around that. And finally, I just said, "Listen, I'll do it." And basically, it was hard for me to put the sword down, And but for my love of those girls, it took a lot to do it. But no, we don't have any contact. I mean, literally, we were at a college graduation probably 6-8 months ago, and we don't speak. We don't acknowledge each other. It's not we can stand. Before, we didn't even stand within 50 feet of one another and stuff like that. It was literally just a polar, almost like putting two magnets together that aren't supposed to go together.
Sure.
And but now, like, we don't, and there's a dynamic with his mom that's not helpful either. But we don't have any contact, and haven't had any while. The last contact I had with him was there were some medical bills that were due a couple of years ago, and I just had sent him an invoice. He never responded. I sent him an email, and then I just said, "Hey, this is due," and basically he said, "I don't have it," and I just wrote back, the least you could do is just say thank you. I said, "I don't mind, Case, but at least you could acknowledge," and he just wrote back thank you on text. Which I took kind of as a smart ass reply, but that's the last contact he and I've had, and that's probably been 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah,
right. Shifting gears a little bit, tell me about you, Cullen. Like, how do you feel about being a dad to 2 awesome kids? I mean, and you don't know that going into the situation, but how did you feel at the start, and how's that shifted over the years?
So at the start, I felt like they didn't get a choice, so it was my responsibility to be as committed to them as I possibly could. They didn't get a choice with me. I knew there was a lot of upset from what they had gone through and seen as kids. I knew there was tension, and so, what I believed to be true was, again, when I married Lauren, I married them. We gave them rings. And it was important that they understood that my commitment was to them as well as her. So that was super foundational to me, is the way that I looked at this, just because I had seen it go other ways before in my own family with my mom's second husband, and how that kind of worked out for my brother and sister, who were full brother and sister. Yeah, so over time, it's a lot of work, man. It's a lot of work, and
it is
a lot of effort, and it's the way I describe it to some people now is it's a thankless job early, but that's the job you chose because, again, the kids didn't choose you, and so it's a job that you don't know. It's an investment you don't know is going to pay off, and so again, it's one of the true joys of my life that I have the relationship I do with Sammy and Marky today because of the investment that I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out. We could have gotten to this point as they're adults, and they could have just said, "See you later. I don't have to deal with you anymore. Peace out." I didn't expect that to happen, but you just don't know. And I did not see that these relationships with them as young adults would blossom into what it is now and bring me so much joy and so much fulfillment. So it's great being the dad to 3 awesome girls, and it's great to have 2 of them, happen to be inherited in the process of getting married, doing so well, and have such a great relationship with, and have their support and help them with their younger sister, and that dynamic going so well, and then seeing the 3 of them connected as one family unit and not as separate. So it's that's where I started, and that's where I feel like we are now as far as me inside of this experience. But I've said before, and I don't mean this I'm so grateful that I had it in my life. I can tell you if something changed, like I always said, if something happened to Lauren or whatever, I don't know that I would have the strength to do it again, knowing how much it takes. Like and sometimes people misinterpret that, but it is. I'm so glad I did it. I don't know that I could do it again.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I hear it as a common theme as well in these conversations that it's a bit of a thankless job early on, and I understand that. Like going through it myself. I'm 7 years in. For the first few years there, I kind of wondered, well, why am I even here? Like, I'm kind of, I'm like the the odd wheel out, and I'm the fourth wheel on a 3-wheel cycle, tricycle, I fully understand that. But I'm starting to see the results now, and just, like you say, you talk about the kids coming to you for advice and stuff. It's actually really it's a really nice feeling when you can sit down with your kids and have a conversation, and there's, it's kind of like that's the reward of 3-4 years of work, just being able to have that real connection with them.
Yeah, for sure. It's an amazing feeling, and in some ways, I don't say it's better. I mean, in some ways, I guess better is probably not the right word, but like with Riley Reid, our youngest, like I expected that from her, I guess because she's mine, she didn't have a choice or whatever.
Yeah, right.
That's not actually true, but you know what I'm saying? But there's some kind of inherent like component to that. But when you get it given freely from someone who doesn't necessarily have to because they're not, related to you, man, talk about a gift.
Yeah. You might have to watch that young one. She might be the one that rebels.
Well, yeah, true that.
It's interesting how, and I was just going to say, like, how's the dynamic? And I'm sure it's probably a good one, but how's the dynamic between the kids? The youngest to the two older girls.
Yeah, so it's great. I mean, it really is good now. I mean, there's the difference in age, so the fact that the older two are whatever, I guess 7 and 9 years older. So there's a little bit more big sister coaching from them down. But then, there is that rebellious factor from Riley Reid back to like, I know what I want to do. But there's a good relationship that continues to build across the 3 of them. And, but early on, I mean, there was some I'm sure there was some kind of trepidation. We laughed because, the only time I ever spanked Marky, the middle one, was after we brought Riley Reid home from the hospital after she was born. She had this little ornament that got painted on the gourd. I don't know if you know what those are, but this little Santa Claus gourd thing, and all of a sudden we saw these marks in the back of it, and then we figured out Marky had basically taken this ornament that had been given to Riley Reid as a baby and pushed her finger into it. So there was a little bit of acting out we had early on, and then Sammy had to sit at like one of the birthday parties like early on we laugh about it because her punishment, she was throwing a bunch of stuff in her room and just kind of acting out, which we kind of figured out later had to do more with attention to the younger sibling, and so I made her pack up everything in her room and put it in the attic, and so her room looked like the Hampton Inn for about a week. And so we had a little bit of noise up front. But really, that didn't last for very long, and now they just all act like sisters and love each other and get aggravated with each other and laugh and fight and, borrow clothes and, do all the great things sisters do. So, very, very good relationship between them, and also one-to-one, right? So, like, not just as a group, but also each one with the other. So that's, awesome as well, and a great sign.
Yeah, it's nice. Kids seem so flexible. They just get along. They kind of must look at us and go, "Why are you guys always jumping up and down about things?" Tell me, what's I mean, there's lots of different dynamics going on. There's lots of things obviously happened over the years. What's the biggest thing that you've kind of had to let go of to not so much keep the peace or anything, but just deal with the situation, the dynamics of everything?
Yeah, so my own desire for them to make a specific choice that I thought was best, whether that be which high school they went to or, situation about, what car got purchased. I mean, those are great examples, but it's more around the ability for me to kind of step back, especially as I got a little bit older, maybe not where they're what I would consider young adult in college and like, hey, now you get to start to do things on your own, but, kind of that middle ground for me of, it's very structured, had a lot of clarity in their life about how things operated and what our expectations were as a family unit, and then having to let go and be like, okay, time for you to make whatever choice you're going to make and live with the consequences of that, even when I could see potential breakdown. And I wasn't always right, for sure, but kind of letting them, stub their toe and go through that, whether that's relationships, both friends and, kind of romantic as boys start to show up in the picture. So those kinds of things. And I think just stepping back and saying, you know what, it's not my life. It's my job to support and love and provide, but I can't make the choice for them. And so shifting, that middle ground between, I'm clear about it now. It's very clear based on their age and what they've done and stuff like that. But there's a middle ground in there that's tough to kind of navigate. And then knowing early on when to really push to create these standards, because I guess I kind of forget about that since it's been so long. Because listen, we were the boring house, we were the bedtime house, we were the brush your teeth house, we were the, you know what I'm saying? There's a lot of like, you got to do your homework before you do this. You can't have that. I mean, there's just a lot of that, and then it was kind of amusement park, do whatever, no rules, and then so having to stay committed to those things, was hard. When it's like the other side of it. You kind of want to get sucked into that. Oh, we're fun too. Oh, we can be loose too. When at the core, there's got to be some structure there to create the life that they're going to want. But man, 17 years in, it looks really clear. 2 years in, not so much.
How are you handling them getting older and, well, almost, at the stage they're going to be moving on, and how's that feel for you?
It's very satisfying. I'm very proud of who they are. I'm excited that they want to be with us as much as they do, so we still see them a lot. They're around a lot. And I'm excited for them. I'm excited for what they've created for themselves. I'm nervous for them about, life and relationship. I think the biggest thing that I worry about for them right now is kind of choosing. We've all been through relationships didn't work out well, but now, at their age, I start thinking about, oh crap, I was already divorced at this point. I start thinking about some of the things that I couldn't see. And so I think the thing I worry about the most for them is kind of choosing the right partner to invest time with. Cause it's like every guy they date now, I'm kind of like, well, this could be the one, this could be the husband. So I worry about that more. Because of their age, because it's 22 and 24, that's a real possibility, So that kind of creeps up on me. I don't know if I went off question, but that.
No. Do you have much input into that? Like, I mean, of course, you're not going to be telling them who to date and whatever, but do you have much input if you do see someone walking up the garden path that is probably not a good fit? Because these are the things that we have to navigate, and it's like, ooh, how far do you go in that conversation?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's surprising how little I give. They always want us to meet somebody and stuff like that, which is great. They're always interested in what, Lauren thinks or what I think. Lauren's always like, oh, he seems super nice. And I'm like, I don't know. Because I just want to see greatness for them and not perfection, but greatness and good, solid men. And,
sure.
It's hard to read some of these guys, but so I don't say too much. I mean, part of it is they were away for school. One was 2 hours away, one was an hour away at school. So you don't necessarily know what's going on there 100%. And now it's more, I'll answer the question when asked. But it's a little bit like more just reinforcing the values that I see in great men and in great relationships, and then encouraging them to look and see if that's there, because it's really not fair for me to project on these guys because I don't know them, and they're nervous when they meet me sometimes, or not nervous, and so it's like, so I don't go too far. I really don't, and it's interesting that you asked the question because if I was stepping out of me, looking at me, I would think I would be more engaged with kind of right, wrong, good, bad, and it's more of an invitation to think about the things that have made their mom and I's relationship great, and what's created the men that they respect, what's created them. So more of a kind of that inventory than specific to a guy, because I just don't know. So I don't give that much input until they really ask, and then I'll just share what I see, and I'll couch that to say, here's what I see based on the time we've spent, which is oftentimes not near as much as the time they spent. So here are the things that seem okay. Here are the things that concern me, and I could be totally off because, young adult men have a way of being able to hide certain characteristics or push other ones forward. So this is my initial read, but I don't know that it's accurate.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting. And I asked the question, obviously, because I'm kind of headed into that, but I think probably the bigger picture, and two boys, it's a totally different kettle of fish. But it's, probably again about instilling good values. I mean, we had our 8-year-old just a couple of days ago bring home a note from a girl that, it was like, I love you, I guess from my point of view, it was like, okay, how do you feel about that? And it was a bit, obviously at that age they're giggling and stuff, but it was like, what are you going to do about that? And he was like, well, I don't know. I was like, well, do you think you should write one back? So he ended up writing a thank you note, which I thought was quite nice. And I mean, you kind of you've got to, I think, instill those little, even if it's a little bit of your own kind of way of being along the way, and it started early. That's what I kind of thought. But I just had to ask that question because it's interesting. Going forward, the boys are going to get older and start bringing girls home. It'll be a totally different conversation. But same nonetheless. Yeah,
and you'll want them to be in relationship with somebody that's going to fit. And that's the other thing that's so crazy, man. It's like I think about, crap, do I want this guy around like for the next decade or the rest of my life or whatever like that, because, I mean, that's, again, a part of the reality. Do I want this, person as part of our expanded family? And because we are as close, and are they going to put this at risk? And we had that at one point with one of the long-term boyfriends where it created a lot of tension and in the family, and there just wasn't a connection, and didn't think he was a great dude, at least, and we didn't think they were great together. And it took a lot of self-control to not be like, you need to ditch the D-bag and move on. And, just letting her go through her process,
Again, instilling good values from the start. I mean, you've obviously put in the work, so I'm sure, it may have been a little bit tricky at the time, but, down the track, I'm sure she'd look back on that and go, phew, thank you.
Yeah, because that just ended about a year ago, and it was, a year and a half of that. And so, that was a tough one. So for both Lauren and I, for sure, tough one.
Yeah. Cullen, I'll wrap this up shortly, mate. It's been awesome, but I just wanted to ask, what's your one big tip or your parting kind of thought for the listeners out there? Stepdads is obviously dealing with all ages, boys and girls, and all sorts of things. What's one piece of wisdom you'd probably want to pass on?
Yeah, so I would say your stepkids didn't choose to have you. And so you are required, in my point of view, to operate from a place that your commitment to their mom encompasses them. Now, it is separate in that they're separate individuals, but when you chose to marry somebody with kids, you chose to marry them as well. And I don't mean that in some kind of fruity-tooty sense. I mean that in that you are committed to and bonded to and connected with, regardless of how they respond to you, regardless of their feedback to you, regardless. Doesn't mean they can be holy terrors, but it does mean that you have to show up that way. And if you expect to have, a long-term and fruitful relationship with them, that's the way you have to show up, and you're going to have to do it when it isn't great and it isn't fun. And so that's kind of a heavy, serious piece. The other is, I would just say, man, have fun with them. I mean, really, truthfully, do fun things, even as they get older. I mean, we have been known to have, wet sponge wars in the middle of our kitchen. We throw people in pools. We play crazy music. We, have been known to do all kind of stuff. We, travel and go to the beach together and go get ice cream. And I mean, just like so simple things, even as they're young adults, where they can have fun and make, our home a place that they want to be in and want to be in with their friends. And that comes from love, and it also comes from fun. And so, I can be as silly and as goofy and as crazy with them and have a ball. And that's created a relationship that now that they want that silly and crazy when they bring their friends with us, even as young adults. So now, we're can be the cool parents too, and so the friends want to come and I'll stay before they go to a concert or whatever else. So, I'd say one, it is the depth of commitment that they did not choose you. And so show up like they deserve to be treated as human beings and didn't get to choose you, yet you have a substantial role in their life. And secondarily, have fun with them and continue to have fun with them, be silly and enjoy them as children regardless of their age.
That's awesome, Cullen. That's so awesome. It's been mentioned a couple of times, but it's always a great reminder because it's always so easy to kind of put on that sterner face to kind of, have things run smoothly. But yeah, I think it goes a long way to be able to have fun with your kids, even into a later age group. So appreciate that, mate. Appreciate it. Thanks very much for joining us on the call, Cullen. Great to have you, and I'm sure we'll catch up again soon. Thanks again.
Would you like to learn more about how stepdads across the globe are joining forces in raising the next generation of leaders? Then head to www.stepdadsuccess.com and grab all the show notes plus a copy of the brand new tactical guide for creating more happiness, health, wealth, and wisdom as a stepdad. And if you liked the podcast, please share it with other stepdads you know and leave us a review on iTunes. Again, that's www.stepdadsuccess.com for all the show notes and tactical guide. Come and join the new breed of stepdads, the growing group of leaders raising leaders.